This is it, guys. The all-new 2024 W214 Mercedes-Benz E-Class. This is a brand new generation for Mercedes' best-selling executive sedan, and let's see what this car is all about. Now, Mercedes-Benz may be going full-on into its EVs, its EQ models, and the GLC may now be the brand's best-selling model instead of the traditional C-classes and E-classes. But out of all Mercedes-Benz models, to me personally, it is the E-Class that I see as the most Mercedes of all Mercedes-Benzes. It is the very car that tells the entire story of what Mercedes-Benz is all about as a car brand. Even through its history, you can tell how Mercedes-Benz as a company has evolved through the years by looking at the contemporary E-Classes of its time. We are here getting an early preview of the W214 at its international press drive here in Vienna, Austria. So yeah, let's see what this car is all about. What's good, what's not so good, what's been improved, what's been, downgraded, and how much better is it compared to the outgoing W213. So, ready? Let's go. Now let's start with the looks first. When it comes to a new version of a well-known brand, well-known model, the exterior looks, the design is extremely crucial. The first impressions will decide whether you like the car or not. And in this case, Mercedes-Benz has come with a little bit of a controversial design, because you can call it conservative, you can call it boring, but at the same time you can also call it daring and courageous. On one hand, it still looks like an E-Class. It is very much recognizable as a mid-size Mercedes-Benz sedan. But if you look at the details, this is a fresh new look for the E-Class. If you look at the headlights especially, they've got a double bubble look down the bottom line that sort of harks back towards the more iconic four-eyed look that started with the W210 E-Class. That was continued through the 211s and 212 generations, but it somehow got diluted and then completely disappeared through W213. That was a bit of a sad moment for all of you E-Class fans, I think, and Mercedes-Benz has recognized that and brought it all back on. Now here, if you look up close, the headlights now have a very thick eyebrows at the top and two very distinctive curves down the bottom with the signature LED DRLs. I think they look very, very good. These, by the way, are the digital light system that's already on the S-Class and the GLC. Nothing new there, but I think it looks good. Now, hopefully, Mercedes-Benz Malaysia will give us these exact lights, because I've seen the lower spec versions. They don't look anywhere near as good. So yeah, here's hoping we are getting the E-Class as we should. But anyway, let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. Now, for the Malaysian market, we should be getting two different variants as usual. A base E200, which should be an avant-garde model, as well as a higher spec E300 version, usually an AMG line variant. The exterior design package is doubly important for the W214 because there are three very distinctly different design packages. You can get an option between an avant-garde, an exclusive line, or an AMG line. I'll tell you up front, there's very little to no chance of us getting the exclusive line with the traditional radiator grille and the top-mounted Mercedes-Benz emblem. What we're actually going to get, the base E200 avant-garde line. Now, we don't have the cars available on test right now, but there have been pictures of the full avant-garde line, and it's pretty much the same bumper from the exclusive line, but with the grille from the AMG line. To me, it's the best of both worlds. I think, to me, this is the best looking E-Class in the W214 range. And then we get to the top of the line, E300E AMG line. Now, as usual, we all know what AMG line is. You get a much sportier looking front bumper, big central star grille, bigger wheels, and so on. In the W214, this includes a very aggressive front apron. For the most part, the W214 AMG line bumper doesn't look bad, but at this point it just looks a little bit tired, a little bit overdone. That Mercedes AMG A-Wing, I've seen it on 5-10 other Mercedes-Benz models from before. I think the Avantgarde bumper looks much fresher. The central grille, however, that is shared between Avantgarde and AMG line, that is a big talking point. The big central star aside, the entire grille is just dotted with a whole bunch of small three-pointed star chrome pins, just like in the GLC and W214 C-Class. That is not new, but what is new to the 214 is that the outline of the grille now is in thick chrome as well, and you can have it with an illuminated grille. Now, Mercedes-Benz is sort of late to the party here. BMW has done illuminated kidney grilles for a couple of years now. I guess they figured, why not join them? And on the E-Class, I think it looks alright. When it's dark, it does give a very distinctive, very aggressive look to the whole front face, but I'd rather have it without. Now, this is something that you either love or hate. For me, I'm not a fan. What about you? Do you like this or not? Do let me know in the comment section below. The grille itself with the chrome pins, I've gotten used to it from the C-Class and the GLC, like I said, and I don't think it looks bad at all. I think it looks great. Again, if you disagree, do comment below. I'd love to know what you guys are thinking about. A big improvement to the W214 front end is how the front bonnet sort of joins into the bumper. The W213, I've always thought, had a really funny, awkward looking join line. It looked a little bit forced at the front end, both pre and post facelift, but this new one with a clean cut line, it looks a lot nicer. The front grille, by the way, if you look up close, it has a really thick black frame. It sort of looks like the grille is wearing very heavy eyeliner. Now, this is a clear connection to the existing Mercedes-Benz EQ models with that, you know, big smiley face up front. This grille is a bit of a connection between regular ICE models and the EQ. You can just tell where Mercedes-Benz is going with this one. This, I believe, the W214 is going to be the absolute last ICE-only E-Class. The next version will see both the E-Class and the EQE sort of combined into a single model. And by having a similar grille right now, that will make the transition smoother through the next couple of years. Moving down the side, the E-Class has traditionally been the most balanced looking sedan in the Mercedes-Benz range. The C-Class has always looked a little bit contorted. The S-Class has always looked a little bit too stretched out. The E-Class for a very long time had the most ideal 3-box sedan traditional shape, and this new version continues that trend as well. Now, exterior dimensions have not changed all that much, going from the 213 to the 214. The overall length has been increased by about 10mm, that's about this much, and the wheelbase has been stretched by 22mm, most of that aiding rear legroom. But at a glance, the cars look pretty much the same as before, and that's also why you would think that Mercedes-Benz has been a little bit conservative in designing the W214. But if you look at the details, like I said, this is a pretty daring design overall. The wheels, by the way, can now go up to 21 inches, which do look good, but yeah, would not fit our local roads at all, I think. I'm now driving in Austria with ridiculously smooth roads, and yeah, here it works. But back home in PJ roads, on Bangsa roads, 21-inch wheels on an E-Class, yeah, that would be a nightmare. Stick to 19s or 20s at most. And then we get to the back, where it has the most controversial part of the W214 design, the rear taillights. Not so much the shape, not so much the overall design, it's the 3-pointed star within the taillights themselves. Now, this is something that perhaps we will get used to, and by the time that happens, we wouldn't mind it as much. But yeah, I think it's a bit much. Seeing it in real life for the very first time, I thought, yeah, no, I think Mercedes-Benz has gone a little bit too far this time in, you know, adding 3-pointed stars everywhere, having 4 huge stars staring back at you. Yeah, perhaps not for me. just in case you missed it, if you look at the bottom line of the taillights, they've got the same double bubble look as headlights up front. And you know what, this is the exact same design language that's already put in place in the EQE SUV. So Mercedes-Benz has been training your eyes for quite a while now to sort of combine the E-Class and the EQE rather subtly. At the bottom of the rear bumper is the usual atrocious Mercedes-Benz fake exhaust tips. On the AMG line, it is ridiculous. You've got big exhaust tips which are completely closed off, while on the Avantgarde, which is similar to the exclusive line by the way, you've got this, well, rather forgivable outline shapes of an exhaust with a chrome line going through the center. I think that's not too bad. Yeah, I can accept that. Now let's talk about the interior. While the exterior may look like a small step forward, a small evolution of the W214, the interior here is completely different, completely fresh. This is a massive step forward, a massive jump forward for the E-Class. It looks completely unrecognizable compared to the W214. The main party piece, of course, is this big MBUX super screen. Now this is a step down from the hyper screens in the EQS and the EQE, but for the most part this is even better than the hyper screen. For one, it has a completely separated instrument cluster in front of the driver, so at least it can be placed at a more reasonable angle. I can see it just nice without too much reflections. On the EQS, EQE, the hyper screens, because they have to follow the exact same angle as the rest of the dashboard screen, it somewhat ends up being awkwardly placed. It ends up reflecting pretty much everything at the top here, and you don't get to see the meters as clearly as you should. Here, it's perfectly fine. The center part, however, is a big change. For one, this is the latest 3rd generation MBUX. It still has a lot of extremely gimmicky things like digital aircon vents that will automatically adjust the aircon vents, whether you want to have it pointing your face or your body or diffuse. And yeah, I really don't see why you would want that kind of thing. But thankfully you can still adjust it the manual way, unlike Porsche that has gone all in with this, you know, digital controls, even to the point of having to adjust your aircon vents through the touchscreen. Mercedes-Benz has not gone that far, but yeah, it is still very much a gimmick. Also part of the super screen is the secondary display for the front passenger. Basically there is a second display over there. It can play games, you can play videos and all that. There is a built-in Zinc video streaming app on that screen over there, and it looks good, it plays well, although perhaps it's not gonna make it into the Malaysian market. We'll have to see on that one. As it is on the EQS, that is nothing much more than a decorative screen. By the way, this super screen is a cost option for the E-Class. Our base E200 will likely come with a standard center screen only, with the right side having this open pore black wood with a lot of illuminated stars on them. I think it looks really good, and if anything, it's not that far off the look of having this super screen. I think this looks nice as a party piece, but in terms of functionality, you're not really losing out on all that much without the super screen. I say that because most of the new functions are on the main screen itself. This is where you can play games like Angry Birds, use the top mounted camera for WebEx, for Zoom video conferences. You can use it to watch TikTok if for whatever reason you'd want to. You can watch video streaming there. You can take a selfie through the camera, again, if you want to. I don't see why you'd want to, but yeah, if you do, you can. One thing that I find a little bit weird with the top mounted camera is that it is pointing straight back, so it's meant to fit all passengers in the car, so you can see all their faces in a way, somewhat like, you know, in-car karaoke look, I guess. But I think it would have been better if you are able to adjust the angle, so perhaps to move it to just look at you when you do a video conference. Yeah, I don't know, right now you can't. It'll just show the entire car with you at the side. It looks a little bit empty. But you know, the way things are going, everybody's on more and more conference calls, especially through COVID. That is a great new addition for a business car like this. Other than that, the dashboard will be very familiar for anyone who's been in a recent Mercedes, especially the EQS, EQE, the new C-Class and S-Class as well. All the controls on the side, all the window controls are taken straight off all those models, and the center portion over here looks very familiar to the current E-Class owners as well. Now, one good change is that we no longer have the option of having, you know, big ugly piano black sections down the center. Now it's either proper wood, whether it's black or brown, or, you know, fake carbon fiber or the real stuff and so on. That big black piano black, even Mercedes-Benz now admits, was a grave mistake. This is much better. Quality wise, I've got good news as well, especially after the W214 C-Class. I was a little bit worried that the E-Class was going to have that small, you know, downgrade in terms of build quality as well. But thankfully, that has not been the case. The top half of the dashboard has this really nice Neppa look leather, even though this is technically artificial Artico leather, but it looks the part, it looks great, it feels even nicer. But throughout the entire dashboard, top to bottom, you can't really find any hard or cheap plastics all around the car. You could in the W214 C-Class, but here it is much nicer than in the C-Class. Overall, I still think that it's a bit of a shame that the E-Class has lost a little bit of its uniqueness, especially in terms of the dashboard design. Last time you can take a look at the E-Class, you know exactly you're looking at an E-Class instead of an S-Class or a C-Class. Right now, you know, small glance, it could be an EQE, it could be an EQS, it could be an E-Class. Yeah, you've got to be a Mercedes-Benz nerd to know exactly what it is. But I'll tell you what's great though, the sound system. Here we've got the top-end Burmester 4D system, and it sounds absolutely beautiful. You've got more than 20 speakers on this car everywhere. You've got 2 actuators embedded within the front 2 seats, so you can feel the music as it plays along. You've got extra tweeters down the back of your headrest for the extra, you know, high-pitched noises. And now it is even rated for Dolby Atmos. Yeah, it sounds extremely good. As for the rear seats, they are actually very similar to the W213. Not that big of a change there. But then again, the W213 had really good seats to begin with. So again, why change something that's not broken? The seats are extremely comfortable. The backrest is at a very nice angle. The base is nice and long. There's a lot of leg room, there's a lot of foot room. Leg room, by the way, has increased by 17 millimeters compared to the W213. All of that coming from the extra length in the wheelbase. It was the best in the business, it is still the best in the business. So yeah, all good in that department. Last thing before we talk about the drive is the boot space. Now, the base petrol version has got the exact same boot space as before, 540 liters, but right now I think the space is even better than before. It's shaped even squarer. You can fit things more easily and more arrange things more evenly in the back, and of course the rear seats fold down flat as well. No complaints there. The E-Class is very widely used as taxis all across Europe anyway, so boot space was never going to be a problem. But it could be if you buy the E300e plug-in hybrid. Because it's a plug-in hybrid, they've got a big battery pack underneath the floor, and also because the battery pack is a lot bigger than the old car. The E350e that we know from before, the W213 version, had a 6.5 kilowatt hour battery. This W214 E300e, or rather the E350e as is going to be badged in Malaysia, has a 25 kilowatt hour battery pack. That is really big. It is 80% the size of a full mini EV battery pack, and that all fits underneath the boot floor. So of course they had to raise the floor up a little bit, but at the same time they have managed to make the boot floor flat this time, and not with a rather awkward step like in the old Mercedes-Benz PHEVs. Now you do get a lot less vertical clearance, but you know, in terms of length, in terms of width, it is just as good as the normal car. You do lose out a lot of volume because of the higher floor, so you get 370 liters instead of 540, but the difference is really bigger in numbers rather than in reality. I think you can still fit a whole lot of bags in the back there without any issues. Now finally, let's talk about how the car drives. Like I said, we are likely getting two variants, a base E200 2-litre petrol and an E300e plug-in hybrid. That's how it's badged here in Europe, but back home in Malaysia it may be called the E350e just to match the previous model. So the base E200 gets the latest M254 2-litre 4-cylinder petrol engine. Now this isn't really an all-new engine, it is a small evolution compared to the M264 from before, but by right we should have gotten this engine in the last facelift of the W213. The W213 was this rather weird Mercedes-Benz that had 3 engine families in a single generation. It started off with a 274 and then halfway through, even before its actual facelift, it was transitioned into the M264. Now in Europe, after the facelift, it was changed to the M254, but we never got that. We continued on with the M264, but eventually we did get the new engine in the W206 C-Class and of course the new GLC as well. In the E200, we are getting a 2-litre version of the engine, not the 1.5 like in the C200, although power outputs are not that far off. Here we are getting 204 PS, 320 Newton meters of torque, and this is still the same Mercedes-Benz's own 9G Tronic/Matic as a torque converter. Nothing wrong with it, it is super smooth, very reactive as well. Perhaps still not quite as snappy as the BMW 8-speed ZF, but yeah, it is a very close second to the best in the world, so that's not too bad, right? So the E200 gets from 0 to 100 in about 7.5 seconds, which is about the same as before, and that's fine. It is more than quick enough for most drivers. This is still far more powerful than the initial E200s from 2016-2017. Mercedes-Benz had already made a big improvement back in 2018-2019, so yeah, if you are still thinking of your old E200 being underpowered, worrying about the new one being so as well, don't worry at all, it is fine. The engine, even though it is a new generation, it still has that a little bit of a gravelly, rough note, especially at low end as you accelerate along, but it does smoothen out and it's a pleasant overall experience driving this car. The much more interesting powertrain is the E300e, or rather the E350e that we will be getting. It is the exact same 2-litre 4-cylinder engine as in the E200, same power outputs as well, 204 PS, 320 Newton meters of torque, but here it is a plug-in hybrid. It has a rather decent electric motor pushing about 130 PS and 440 Newton meters of torque. So the total output figures, the total system output is rated at around 312 PS and 550 Newton meters of torque. That sounds really good, but as a whole it doesn't feel all that quick. It was like the first time I drove the C350e from before. It had insane numbers, 600 Newton meters of torque, but it never felt like it had that much torque. It's the same with this as well. I would rate this, like compared to the old version, slightly quicker than the old E300 that had about 400 Newton meters. This feels slightly more than that, so yeah, perhaps 500 at most, definitely not 550. But as we all know, PHEVs or plug-in hybrids is not about outright speed. It is all about that immediate semi-EV acceleration that you get as you step on the throttle and the car just jumps forward. It really does feel like an EV light. Now, add to the fact that this has a much bigger battery pack, as I mentioned before, 25 kilowatt instead of just 6 in the old version. You get an EV range of 100 kilometers. The old car had at best 30 kilometers, and that, by the way, was on a much more optimistic NEDC cycle. In the real world, you'd be lucky to get 25 kilometers. Here on this car, it is 100 kilometers on the WLTP cycle. Usually you'd get about 90% of that, so 90 kilometers full electric mode on an E-Class. I think that is brilliant. This car, you can just charge it up in a couple of hours, leave it charging overnight, and in the next morning you have a full 90 to 100 kilometers worth of all electric range. If you drive less than 100 kilometers per day, which honestly most of us do, you can go months before you even need to refuel the car at all. And one thing's for sure, Mercedes-Benz has definitely improved its braking system in its plug-in hybrids. Most hybrid Mercedes-Benzes have a bit of a sloppy braking feel. You can definitely feel when it transitions from friction brake to regenerative braking, and thankfully in the W214 that transition phase is now a lot more seamless. For the most part, you don't even feel that it's changing from, you know, regular friction brakes to regenerative braking. That is definitely a good thing. It's not quite as perfect as, say, a BMW PHEV, but it is getting there really quickly. Now let's talk about suspension, and that's where we have a bit of a problem, because all the test cars here in Europe, in Austria, are completely fully decked out with all the options. So unfortunately, all the cars here that we are testing have the top of the line Airmatic air suspension system, which we are likely not getting. For the W214, there are only two different suspension systems. There is the base agility control suspension. That's basically a fully passive steel spring and damper suspension with a fancy name, but it's not selective in any way. You cannot adjust it to become softer or harder or sporty or whatever. What it is what you get. That is, the base suspension is likely what we're going to be getting back home in Malaysia, looking at the past track record, and unfortunately I can't yet test that system. What we have over here are just the top of the line Airmatic air suspension system, which works really great. It is a little bit floaty on the highway, just as you'd want it. It is super supple through back roads, and it's such a lovely ride. It helps, of course, that Austria has abnormally good roads. Like I said, back home in Bangsa, in PJ, now that is a proper workout for a suspension system. Here in Austria with the smooth roads, this is a walk in the park. But having said that, it is looking good for the base suspension for the E-Class, because both the W206 C-Class and the GLC SUV have made massive strides in the base suspension systems for their cars. The W206 C-Class, for instance, feels almost as comfortable as a 213 E-Class. So if you put the same improvement on an E-Class, the W214, even with its basic suspension, should be a very comfortable car to drive in. I can't be 100% certain just yet, but it's looking good, I'd say. Speaking of suspension systems, the W214, like I said, only has two different suspensions. The W213 had a third option, which was the middle ground dynamic body control. But Mercedes-Benz said that that turned out to be a bit of a waste of money, because customers either went for the base or the top suspension. Nobody looked for the middle ground. Now for the W213, the middle ground suspension was actually absolutely fantastic. We had it for a very short time in the E350. That was great, but yeah, we've never seen it since, and we're not going to see it in the W214 either. Very likely that base E200 will get the base agility control suspension, while the plug-in hybrid E350e will get a combination of both passive steel springs up front and an Airmatic suspension systems at the rear axle. The rears, you really have no choice, because the extra weight of the battery pack, that really needs a self-leveling air suspension system to support all that weight. So yeah, the hybrid version gets a hybrid suspension. Let's just put it as that. Now let's move on to refinement, and this is where I think Mercedes-Benz has made the biggest gains yet, surprisingly. The W213 was a rather refined car as a whole, but as soon as you hit like 130, 140, there's a lot of annoying wind noise coming into the cabin. The W214, however, was pin drop silent even at 130, 150 here. It could be the smooth Austrian roads, it could be the fact that these cars over here have double glazing windows, but yeah, I do see a big improvement on this car compared to the old versions. With the current GLC, we've already seen that Mercedes-Benz Malaysia is starting to offer double glazing windows on local cars other than in the S-Class, so I'm hopeful that the E-Class, the W214, is going to get double glazed windows as well. We really do need it the way we drive back home in Malaysia. We may have a speed limit of 110, but if you actually do 110 on our highways, you have to be on the slow, the left lane. That's just how it is. So I think that's about it for the W214 E-Class. I didn't really get to drive it much, so there's not much I can say into further details. And the car that I did get to drive had the wrong suspension on it, so yeah, unfortunately I really can't go into too much deeper details than this. But by the time you watch this, the E-Class would be launched in Malaysia very, very soon, so we can do a more in-depth review on the local cars with the exact local specs that we are getting. We'll see by then how accurate all my guesses have been. E200, E350e, base suspension, no airmatic, super screen for the PHEV, basic screen for the E200. We will see, but I think I won't be that far off. So anyway, what do you think of this E-Class? What do you think of this car's looks? What do you think of this interior? Do you think it's too gimmicky? Do you think it's too far different compared to a traditional E-Class? And what do you think of the car as a whole? Are you a fan? Are you not a fan? For me, based on my first impressions, this is a fantastic Mercedes-Benz E-Class. The interior especially is a big step forward. Exterior perhaps not quite as much, but the details are all really nice to see. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed all my ramblings. I'll see you again in the next video. Hopefully we get to drive the local version very, very soon. Thank you guys for watching, and stay safe everyone.